So thank you, Sandra, Ross, Iona. That was really helpful, interesting. We're open for questions.
For common grazings, where there's the possibility of the higher payment for the under 40s, how does that work for common grazings? Does there need to be like a majority of shareholders that are under 40, or is it all of the shareholders? How does that work?
It's all of them, Sandra. Yeah.
Okay.
So it almost never happens in reality, you know, unless you've got a common grazing with one or two shareholders. You know, I mean, most of the common grazing works through CAGs is 80% grant rate, which is still a very good grant rate. You know.
I have a question in the chat. This is for Iona. Does the Woodland Trust help with deer fencing for smaller areas?
Generally, we don't help with any fencing costs, but what we do is we help you apply for fencing elsewhere if there's suitable grants available, for example, through CAGs or through the FGS. So no, unfortunately, we don't have money for that. I will say the one thing I didn't put a slide in there, and I should have probably mentioned, is that we actually have a third offer. So we've got more woods, more hedges, and we do have a third offer, which is called Trees for Your Farm, which again is open to the entire UK. And I didn't put it in because it's always so massively oversubscribed every year that I think they're running 2 years behind at the moment, actually, because there were so many applications for it. But essentially what that does is it does pay for some fencing. It's calculated on a per tree basis, and I think it's something like £10 per tree or something. And you can use that towards your fencing costs. But as I say, we struggle to access it in Scotland because it's just so massively oversubscribed. We just don't have enough funding for it at the moment. So, but if you do have, what I would say is that if you do have a proposal or you are interested, it is worth getting in touch with us if you can, and we'll try and find a workaround. We are actually, one of the things we're looking at the moment are alternative specs for deer fencing as well. So not just doing the Forestry Commission standard, whatever 2 metre, double net deer fence, but actually looking at, particularly for smaller schemes, looking at things like a stop fence with some extra line wires and using deer deterrents like trico and so on, which is all possible with smaller schemes, but obviously not with larger ones. So what we try and do is design a kind of bespoke scheme for your set of circumstances.
Thanks, Iona. We have another question here. So this is for Ross and for Sandra. Does the CAGs or Scottish Forestry Grant Scheme for fencing apply if it's for hedging? I'll let Ross answer that first.
So yeah, you can apply for hedging under CAGs, and you will get the associated fencing along with that hedge to protect it as part of the grant funding. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks for that, Ross. That's a great answer because, yeah, unfortunately, the Forestry Grant Scheme doesn't cover hedging. As I say, our minimum width is 15 metres, so that would be kind of more of a shelter belt than an actual hedge. So CAGs or agri-environment options would be the better ones to go for.
And the agri-environment options, how do people apply for those?
Sorry, Sandra, are you going to come in there?
No, I was just going to say, I'll let you answer this one.
Yeah, so the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme, which is an agri-environment scheme that RPID administer, hedging is one of the options available under that scheme.
The contract lengths across the various schemes, aside from CAGs, are quite long. What happens if, for some adverse reason, you can no longer look after your trees once planted?
Okay, this is very, I'll say, case specific, depending what that adverse reason actually is. So let's say if it's in a scenario of the property being sold on, then those obligations can be transferred onto the incomer from the outgoer, as long as the buyer, the new person coming in, is willing to take on those obligations. It's Yeah, it's very case specific, because obviously, you know, there might be something like force majeure if somebody has taken ill, or you know, some tragic things happen. But we would generally expect though them to be looked after, maintained for those 20 years. But if there's any issues, just come and speak to us direct, if you know, if it's an existing case, and we can see what we can do.
Thanks, Sandra. I don't know. Is that the same for the Croft Woodland Project, Iona?
Yes, it is exactly. I think our maintenance period is actually slightly longer because our scheme is paid for by Lloyds. They decided on the length of time, and I think they said something like 30 years. But the reality of it is that most trees are well established by about year 10 anyway, even on really difficult sites. So we tend to find that actually your period of kind of more intense management is really the first 5 to 7 years, and then after that, it really, provided they're above deer height, they start to look after themselves really. So, but yes, I mean there's an expectation that it will always be woodland once it's planted as a woodland. I think that would be the same for Scottish Forestry as well. That they expect there to be a woodland there.
Thanks very much for that, Iona. That's a really good point. Yeah, once it gets past that establishment phase, as long as fences are maintained, really the trees should be getting away on their own.
Yeah. Okay, but you wouldn't be able to cut them all down within the 20 years.
No, not ideal.
Wouldn't be encouraged.
But encourage, yes, speak to us if there's any issues or whatever, then yeah, come and speak to us direct, and we can see what can be done.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So Neil's saying, in working with the Woodland Trust recently, I think this might be you, Iona, maybe, the RSPB were unhappy with our plans, which meant the Woodland Trust couldn't proceed. Would this objection also apply to the forestry scheme and the CAGS only scheme? We're still keen to do our shelter belts due to our exposure on the north coast. So actually, this is really for Sandra and Ross. It might depend what the RSPB issue is, I guess.
Okay, I'll maybe just launch in there. Yeah, it would really depend on what is the bird sensitivity for. Okay, curlews, right? Depends on that sensitivity. If it was a bird species that maybe mitigations could be worked around about timings. So say, for instance, any of the operations, the fencing, the groundworks, whatever could be done out with the bird breeding season, that might be appropriate. However, curlews are ground nesting birds, so they really want to, they need that habitat to go. It would really come down to bird surveys. What sort of population of curlews have we got here? So curlews are a really site-specific, case-specific issue. Sorry, that sounds like a bit of a cop-out answer. But yeah, I'm afraid curlews in many cases can trump woodland creation, unfortunately.
I don't really have anything to add to what Sandra said there. I mean, I think, you know, our position would be the same in relation to CAGs. You know, we would have to consider any negative environmental impacts, you know, in the round. So yeah.
Can I just butt in on that one a wee bit? That there is a lot of discussion taking place at the moment about waders and woodlands or waders and woodland creation. I know that Scottish Forestry are in the process of reviewing their policy on this at the moment. Sandra, is that right? Kenny Cortland, I think, is working on a review of it on it at the moment, and there are various working groups being held around this because it's become such an issue over the last few years about. You know, I mean, somebody's put in the chat here something about there are no curlews on our land anyway, and yet we still can't, and that's a common problem throughout, actually. So we are working with RSPB and Nature Scot and Scottish Forestry, but we're all working together to try and find some way around this. So watch this space. There might be some movement on it within the next couple of years.
Yeah, thanks, Iona.
Okay. So is it still worth Neil going to the local RPID office for that conversation, or is it, as you say, it's very case specific, or to?
Yeah, come to Scottish Forestry office. Sorry, not dissing RPID, but yeah, come to us in the first place, or liaise with both. But yeah, at least if we have an idea of if we discuss where the site is, what the issue is, and we can kind of build a picture what the curlew population is like in that particular area, and we can continue discussions there.
Yeah, likewise from the RPID side.
Okay. Thanks very much. I'm going to go to, is it Raluca? I apologize if I get that wrong.
Right, it's Raluca. Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Ruth, I think you mentioned one of the conditions for offering grants is the local ground condition. And I think you said if it's more than 50 centimeter depth,
Yes.
the depth of the pit, then yeah. So I'm wondering, it might be, I've not measured it, but it might be that's more than 50 centimeter. Is there a way to work around that and kind of, this is more practical, not even around the grants, but in everyone's knowledge here. Am I hoping in vain to plant trees in this soil?
If there's so anything at all that has a peat depth of more than 50 centimeters cannot be touched. And also depends on, I mean, there may be, if there are pockets perhaps in some, maybe some higher knolls or anything around these kind of areas that might be plantable. Again, it's this site specific wording that I keep saying, but yeah, if it's complete blanket 50 centimeters, then it's definitely a no from us. But if there's potential for pockets here and there, then there might be scope maybe for something else, a native low density option or that.
So what would be my first step then, to have a survey called the Woodland Trust? Iona, is that contact?
Get in touch with Woodland Trust initially.
Yes, definitely get in touch. I mean, we would be able to do a very cursory one, just to walk over the site and actually see whether or not it's all deep peat, or whether, as Sandra said, there could be pockets where it's shallower or pockets that are better drained and it's, the soil is actually, so it's definitely worth getting in touch with us. Where are you based?
Isle of Lewis on the west coast of the island.
So yeah, if you get in touch with Laura, she will happily come out and have a look at it. Laura McEwen can put our general crofting one in, and if you just email that, I'll forward it on to her.
Training for the Isle of Lewis. How would I know when and where that is?
Well, again, Laura's your person to talk to there. I mean, normally what we do in the spring is we hold some planting events, just so that people can see how to do mounding and planting and that kind of thing. So just a demonstration on a site that's having a more woods planted. So I'm sure there'll be one or two of those as well going on.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. I'm going to go back to the chat now. Claire is asking, how do I decide which organisation to go with? Can I be in two schemes at once?
So from our side, just because maybe you had an approval from Scottish Forestry for a forestry grant scheme, that wouldn't stop you from applying to CAGs, as long as obviously it's not double funding, i.e. we're not paying money from two different schemes on the same site. So from our side, you could have a forestry grant scheme for new woodland creation and a certain part of your holding, your croft, and you could have a grant from us for somewhere else on your croft for something similar.
Thanks for that, Ross. Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, just as Ross says, yeah, we can't fund the same proposal twice, but if it's different parts within the holding, then yeah, that's fine.
I can just from the Woodland Trust point of view. I mean, obviously we're completely independent. We're a charity, so we can fund things on land if we can fund a part of a scheme. But generally speaking, we would not be looking to exactly what Ross said, double fund anything. If you're receiving funding for a particular planting scheme elsewhere, then we might agree to do it as a top up, or a fund something extra onto it, but we wouldn't be funding the same thing. You wouldn't be paid for the trees twice, put it this way. That's
But you can potentially top up other funding schemes or work with RPID for fencing, and you provide tree. I don't know, are there sort of ways of working together to
Absolutely, yes, there are, and I mean, Sandra mentioned earlier on that for the Northern and Western Isles option, the fencing has been doubled. The fencing amount's been doubled recently, and it's been doubled because the fencing costs in the Western Isles and the Northern Isles are absolutely ridiculous. I mean, they're coming in at about £25 a metre for deer fencing, and the grant was £9.90. So clearly there was a massive discrepancy there, and we have, over the last few years, we have been able to do a bit of a top up, maybe by buying some of the materials, and then people could claim their grants. The fact that that's now been doubled means that we'll probably be using what limited top up funds we have for other types of projects. But it's always worth getting in touch with us if you, and particularly if you have done your forestry grant scheme through us. Your local advisor will advise you on what's possible anyway, and what funding is, what funding might be available. So it's your best just to keep in touch with us.
That's great, thank you. Okay, so there's a message. Dottie, she says, I'm new to crofting, just moved to a croft on the west side of Lewis. She would like to try to combine her experience in growing with people with autism, learning difficulties, etc. Involve local schools, which scheme would best fit. And Iona is suggesting the Croft Woodland Project. Dan has suggested she gets in touch with Laura.
Absolutely, and the other Horseshadow Community Nursery also already do some work like this, so I think it might be worth getting in touch with them too. And they certainly run a scheme with local school kids, because in fact Laura used to work there, and she was very involved in it. So I think there are some initiatives already on the go in Lewis and Harris, so it would certainly be worth trying to make contact with some of the people who are already involved in it. And Laura is probably one of your key people, actually, so I would definitely get in touch with her.
So Fiona is asking a general question about the different grants. With current public funding challenges, is there a timeline on how long the different grants will be available?
I'll maybe just step in there. I'm sure we're all aware that the government have annual targets for tree planting, and there's certain obligations for meeting climate change targets, etc. So it's maybe quite flippant to say, but it's likely that there will always be some sort of funding there available for people to plant trees as an incentive. Otherwise, if we've got government targets for doing planting and there's no funding available, then those targets nothing's going to be achieved on that. So certainly business as normal for as long as we can see at the moment.
And just in relation to our schemes, obviously the Woodland Trust is a charity, and everything we do is funded by external funders. So we will carry on for as long as we have funding, but we do have to look around. I mean, it's a big part of the work that everybody does is finding funding every year. At the moment, our Moorwood scheme is funded by Lloyd's, and I think it's funded for until either 28 or 30, I can't remember. And then after that, there'll probably be another fund. Previously, it was funded by Sainsbury's, so our funders seem to be very good at constantly finding a new source of funding for it. But yeah, so hopefully we will carry on too.
Yeah. So I mean, there's no sort of end date for CAGs, as a scheme. It's one of the few schemes we have actually that's open 12 months of the year. You can apply to CAGs anytime. We get an annual budget for CAGs. Now, obviously, the way our budgets work, they're allocated every 12 months. But there's absolutely no indication at this stage that there's any end date in sight for CAGs in particular. It's a very popular scheme. It's well used by the crofting counties. So, yeah.
Anne is asking, does anyone know, or has anyone tried to cultivate truffles?
I'm afraid I've got absolutely zero knowledge on that at all.
Well, yes, I have a little bit. Just I know one or two crofters who have tried. There was a chap, I'm trying to remember, his name was Paul something. He was he's a professor at Stirling University, and he runs a company which I've completely forgotten the name of, but I'll Google it afterwards and send Celia the details to send out. He ran a lot of trials and had a lot of success with them. And I showed you a picture earlier on of a hedge on Butte. Well, that same chap has actually planted an oak woodland of, and it was trees that have all been dipped in an inoculation that has the truffles within it. So we're waiting with bated breath to see how many he gets from it. But actually, the trees must have been in for about 4 or 5 years now. And I think he was told he would be harvesting truffles within 10. So we'll see. But it's certainly been successful in other parts of Scotland. There's the same technique has been used. It's very successfully to basically produce woodlands, or to grow woodlands that are producing truffles. So, and apparently with climate change, our climate is becoming more and more favourable for several types of truffle. So yeah, it's looks like it might be a possibility. I would say you would have to have very specific soil types, and clearly things like oak and chestnut and so on are the favourite species. But so it's probably going to rule out the Western Isles, but certainly parts of mainland Argyll are probably quite suited for it, and parts of Highland too, I would say.
Iona, we're actually in your area. So
are you?
Yeah, so
where are you?
Roe Oaks, on Lochgoyle.
All right, okay.
Yeah. So anyway,
there's probably I'll dig out the details for that company and that chap and see if I can get it, and I'll send them through then, because yeah, I would, if they're going to be able to do it anywhere, I would say Lochgoyle's probably pretty good for it. Yeah.
We'll share contact details for everyone anyway, so that people can come to you directly, because I think that's probably the best option anyway, isn't it? Because every scheme is so different. But I would think, are you a good place to start, Iona? You would be the first port of call and would signpost people. Would that be?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we said earlier, we're happy to do like a kind of an assessment of the ground and decide what the best options are and look at what the funding options might be. So absolutely, yes. If you've got a proposal, please do get in touch, and one of us will try and get out and see it and take it from there.
And I think, Celia, just from our point of view, I think we would, people thinking about CAGs for shelter belts, we would encourage them to go to the Woodland Trust first as well and get some advice, so that they've got that help and guidance before they apply to us. That would be quite important for us, I think.
Yeah, and then they're choosing the right sort of trees and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good to know.
Okay, and I would just add to that as well that once a proposal is sort of semi-worked up, or the applicant knows it's going to be a goer, so to say, and then that's when to come to Scottish Forestry as well.
Yeah.
Okay, but you quite often use agents for that, don't you? For that, is that? I'm just speaking because we did one.
Yeah, and what we generally do is we visit the site and assure that we think that there is a viable scheme there, and then we bring an agent in. That's really how we do it. But the idea being that a lot of people in the past have, particularly for small schemes, there is a bit of a tipping point, and obviously it is. It's not an automatic right that you're going to get a grant. I mean, you're basically competing. It's a competitive scheme, so it's really good to get an opinion from somebody who's been through the process to know that your scheme has got a very good chance of going through, and what kind of things it is you're going to have to include in it. I mean, your scheme, Celia, was a particularly complicated one because it was very small and it had some WIG and some woodland creation, but. I mean, it was quite obvious from when I first visited it that there was clearly a good scheme there. So, and that would certainly fall within the Northern and Western Isles option. So, I think just having somebody to come and give you that advice and actually do the report and bring somebody else in, and bringing an agent in is the easiest way to do it. I mean, unless you've got extremely good GIS skills, you're quite technically minded, because all the applications are online now too. I think if you can use an agent to do it, it just makes things a lot easier. They know their way around the system. They know how to apply for it. They know what information is required. So yeah, I mean, and obviously we can help with that. We can bring an agent in and do that for you.
Thanks for coming along.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.